Welcome everybody. I appreciate you joining me in my webinar. This is How to Eat an Elephant, the 5-part process to quadrupling your profits. I'm Larry Earnhardt. I'm your Alchemist Professor, and I'm a university professor. I'm a small business owner. I've worked in large chemical production facilities with running as an operations manager, running $100 million plus facilities. And I've owned a restaurant, a franchise business. I've done taxes. I've been a financial advisor. Now I'm a business consultant. During this time, I've learned a lot about business inside and out. I've been done pretty much all aspects you can do in a business. And what I'm doing today is I'm bringing you the results of my analysis of business operations and hoping to help you learn how to improve your business. So the process that I'm talking about should be applicable to any business, large or small, and pretty much at any level or any stage of business operations. So first of all, why would you want to own a business? There's a number of reasons why. It includes it being a job. When I bought my restaurant, my accountant, one of my accountant's questions was, are you making an investment or are you buying a job? And that's always a good question when we're doing this, because a lot of small business owners basically are just toiling, living from hand to mouth, and the reality is they're running they bought themselves a job, and it's not really an investment because there's not a value that they've created to be able to impart or sell at the end of it. You want to provide a needed product or service, doing something good, making a product that people want, a service that people want. There's social benefits, connections that you make. You're providing jobs for people in the community. Get to meet people. When I had my handyman business, I sure met a lot of very interesting people, that's for sure. Power, being able to be the boss. You have power over others. But the real reason for owning a business is profit. If you don't have a profitable business, you eventually won't have a business because eventually the business goes under. So profit is the result of, it's a motivation, it's a real reason for having a business. So what is profit? Profit's the money that's left in your pocket after all the expenses are paid. How much profit do you need? Well, first of all, what are your goals? Do you need a lot of money? Do you need a little money? Do you need just enough to get by? What is it that you want to do with your business? And that's an important thing to think about. Quite often, again, when we're in our day-to-day operation of the business, we're not really thinking about where we're headed. We start a business up. We have a good idea. We have a good product. We have something that the community needs. And what do? We just put our heads down and we go forward trying to make this, and we hope that the business will grow. But the reality is, if you look at what the end result should be, then you can plan and you can try to create something that you can strive for. And in part, this is what we're doing today, is creating something that allows you to figure out what your final goals are. Your goals depend on your vision of the future and your own wants and needs and those of your family. But it's easier to become bigger if you plan for it. So do you want a $50,000 company, a $500,000 company, perhaps a $5 million company? I have a client who decided that she wants to have a $5 million company. And whether she achieves it or not, we don't know. It's a pretty big goal for her to achieve. But by planning to expand, by planning to have a company that may be not just national, but perhaps international in scope, but has departments, has processes, you are going to create something that at least has a possibility of growing. Whereas if you are starting at $50,000 and you allow it to grow without thought, it may grow or it may not grow, but you don't have control over what's happening. So let's do some planning here. Let's think about this. First of all, you notice that the background here is a chalkboard. So I'm in my professor mode here, and we're going to do some chalk drawings. So first of all, we have the cookie jar, or your wallet. And this is where the money goes. This is where the revenues go. This is where the profits end up. And the cookies represent your money. We have a prospective customer. You notice he's a stick figure, his arms are down, he's got a question mark over his head. This is somebody who's heard about your business and isn't sure whether or not he's ready to buy your products. And this is your purchasing customer. This person's got their cookie in their hand. They're ready to hand it over to you in exchange for the product or service that you're providing. And then finally, you have the customer, the happy customer, the person who's bought your product, the person who has decided, you know what, this is a good thing for me. I need it. Here's the money, and I appreciate what you've done. So, again, what's profit? Profit is a function of revenues and expenses. It's revenues minus expenses. So all the money that comes in from all those people, all those customers who are buying, goes into your cookie jar. However, the expenses come out. What are the expenses that you have? You may have a product. You have materials for your product. You have office supplies, sales and marketing expenses. If you have employees, there are personnel expenses. Then, of course, if you have a profit, then you also have taxes. So quite often, there may not be a lot left there. So we're also going to talk about profit margin. Profit margin is one of the common business ratios. It's a very good measure of a company. And profit margin may be very large in the case of a company that makes luxury items or does services. It may be very small in a company like a Walmart or grocery store, which generates about 3 or 4% profit. But it's also a good way to measure your business over time to see if that profit margin is growing or shrinking as well. Profit margin is profits divided by revenues. So you have your profit cookie jar divided by your revenue cookie jar. Now we're going to start breaking things down. What makes up profit? What are the components of profit? A way to look at profit is it's revenues times profit margin. So again, we have our cookie jars. We have our revenue cookie jar, and we have our profit margin cookie jar. Profit margin is profits divided by revenues. Of course, revenues cancel each other out. You're left with profits. Okay, so now we're going to look at revenues, and we're going to put the profit margin aside. We'll come back to that later. So we're going to start breaking revenues down. There are 4 components to revenues that we're going to be looking at. So first of all, we're going to separate it out into 2 components. As I'm sure you're well aware, revenues is a function of the number of customers times the dollars those customers bring to you, which we can call customer value. So in a year's time, you may have so many customers who, on average, have purchased so many dollars worth of goods. And that's what your revenues are. Now, the thing about numbers of customers and their customer value is that's a number that's in the past. Customers are people who have already become customers. They're people who have already paid the money for your business, for your products. So let's see if we can break these down into some more components here. First, let's look at number of customers. Number of customers is a function of number of prospects and the rate at which those prospects get converted into being customers, called the conversion rate. And that conversion rate actually, like many of these ratios in a business, tends to be very stable over time. That if you do very similar prospecting activities and sales activities, you're going to end up with a similar conversion rate. And so that's something that you can use and you can actually fairly well rely on. These are among the ones that you can influence. Now let's break down customer value. Customer value is a function of price, or dollars per customer, times the number of times that customer comes in to your store and buys something. And again, these are the ones you can influence. And these also make up your sales funnel. Now, what's a sales funnel? Okay, well, sales funnel's not that, but I sort of like the picture, so I thought I'd throw it in. Your sales funnel starts with the general population. It could be the entire world as your potential customer base. It could be your community. It could be a very small subset. You may have a very specialized product. The suspects are the people who haven't necessarily heard about your business and who are not right now prospects. if you're doing marketing activities, you have people learn about your business, your products, those become prospects. Those are the people that you want to influence to become customers. They're people who've heard about you. As you go into, from marketing, you go into selling, and you start asking for orders, those prospects become leads, and eventually they turn into customers once those leads have actually purchased something from you. Okay, so now let's go start looking a little bit more closely at prospects. Your prospective customers are a function of the amount of marketing activity you do. How much you go out, how much you brand yourself, how many times you touch somebody, how many times you connect with them through social media, through sending out flyers, through radio and TV ads. Those are the people who learn about your company, and they will eventually decide whether or not they want to buy your product. But at this point, they're not ready to buy, or they may be ready to buy, but they're not in a position to buy. Maybe it's not time yet. Maybe whatever it is that they're buying, it's not, they don't need a replacement for it, say. Okay, now let's go back to and look at conversion rate. So again, that conversion rate is the percentage of people who are prospects who turn into customers. Now, when I had my handyman business, I would send out 10,000 flyers. Out of those 10,000 flyers, I would get 20 people who would call up the office for a 0.2% response rate to my marketing. Of those 20 customers, I would send a craftsman out, he would do an estimate, and 10 of those estimates, people would come on board and they would become customers. So my conversion rate is 50%. 50% of my prospective customers would eventually become real customers. And I could pretty much rely on that number. Okay, so back to customer value. Now the price and dollars per sale. Price and dollars per sale is not exactly the same thing because you may have more than one product. So the price is the amount of money you charge for one product. These dollars per sale, perhaps you're like a grocery store and there's a basket full of goods, each with a different price on it. So that's why we talk about dollars per sale. And you're the one who sets the price for your product. You may be high, it may be low, you may be a low-cost leader, you may want to provide the high-priced, expensive type of service or product. That's your choice. Okay, now let's go back to sales per customer. One of the things quite often, especially as small business owners, that we tend to neglect is sales per customer. And that's the number of times somebody comes back to you and purchases more of your products, more sales. One thing to consider is the cost of acquisition of that customer. When I sent out those flyers, 10,000 flyers would cost me about 20 cents each to print and to send out through Canada Post. So it would be about $500 for one of those for a marketing spend of to get 10,000 flyers out. And that means that if I end up with 10 customers, I'm spending $50 a customer. That's my customer acquisition cost. Now, the cost to get somebody to come back and work with me again, they already know who I am. They already have hopefully had a positive experience. So it shouldn't take me a lot to get them, to nudge them and get them to work, call me up for the next job. So normally it's a lot less cost to bring in that customer for a second or third or fourth time. But we do tend to neglect that because we neglect that touching of the customer a second or third or fourth time. So now we've got the 5 parts of profit. Number of prospects, conversion rate, dollars per sale, sales per customer, and profit margin. And these are the 5 things, call them knobs or dials that you can turn. You can adjust what you do here. And what you will end up with will be customers and sales and eventually profits. So now let's look at an example. Multiplying your profit. So how would you go about quadrupling your profits? That's the point of this. So we're going to talk about quadrupling our profits here. So again, we have our 5-part process. And let's look at an example. I'm going to put some numbers in here. They're arbitrary. Every company has a different set of these numbers, but I'm going to use these because they're easy for me to calculate with. So I'm going to assume a profit margin of 50%. That was my gross profit margin for my handyman business. Half of the money that I took in went right out to the craftsmen as their commission. My net profit was a lot lower than that. Sales per customer is $1. Dollars per sale price is $100. Our conversion rate we're going to assume is 50%. So let's calculate the number of prospects we need to do this. A 50% profit margin means that for $25,000 profit, we need $50,000 in revenues. And that also means at $100 a sale that we need 500 customers. And that means at a conversion rate of 50% that we have to have 1,000 prospective customers in our sales funnel. And you will find, if you don't know this already, you will note that this is something that is fairly stable. It's not going to change drastically from one month to the next. So if we want $100,000 in profit, if we want to quadruple our profits using these same numbers, $100,000 profit means $200,000 in revenues, 2,000 customers, and actually 4,000 prospective customers. So to me, that's a pretty big leap to quadruple the number of prospects in order to quadruple our revenues, or our profits, I mean. I find that to be a pretty big elephant to swallow in one bite. So if we look at breaking this apart and doing this in an incremental fashion, one spoonful at a time, how about instead of 4,000 prospects, let's increase the number of prospects by 10%, conversion rate by 10%, dollars per sale, the price by 10%, sales per customer by 10%, and our profit margin by 10%. We do each of those, and your profits actually increase by 40%, or 1.4 times. So your profit goes from $25,000 to $36,000 now. Now we're going to do this, or what this means is we now have 1,100 prospects in our funnel. We're converting them at a little higher rate of 55%. Dollars per sale is $110. Sales per customer is 1.1. Profit margin is 55%. Now, each and one of these individually doesn't seem like it'd be a big deal. Obviously, there's some limitations. If your profit margin is already 90%, it's going to be hard put to bring it up to 95% or more, or 99% is 10%, and you can't go beyond 100. So each business is going to be different. But the principle here is we're going to make incremental changes over time. So let's do this again. Maybe this is a quarterly plan that we have. So this quarter, we're going to do another 10%. Profits now, you calculate this through, they increased over 2 times. So now your profits have gone from $25,000 to $53,000. And again, profits have increased threefold, from $25,000 to $78,000. One more time, so fourth quarter, profits actually have increased 4.5 times or so. Not just 4, but over 4 times. So now our profit's gone from $25,000 to $114,000. And what that means is starting with the $25,000 profit, 1,000 prospects, conversion rate 50% and so on. We end at a $100,000 profit, and basically we've just brought each one of these individual items by just under 50% more. So now I've got 1,400 prospects. Conversion rate's gone from 50% to 73%. Dollars per sale, just under $150 per price. Sales per customer has gone from 1 to 1.5. And our profit margin has increased to 73%. So these are all things that we are doing to influence each one of these items separately. So in order to quadruple your profits, you need to increase your marketing activities to increase the number of prospects. You need to increase your sales activities to change the conversion ratio. You want to look to increasing your prices. Price increase is very controversial. I know it's hard to think of, well, I got to increase my prices, but if you think about it, you can be the low price leader and compete on price. We tend to do this, especially in my handyman business. We're always thinking about competing on price. But the reality is, if you have a good product and you have good service and you're superior to your competitors in a real sense, not an imagined sense, you should be able to charge a higher price. And you should avoid to compete on price. Another way to look at this is the consumers who are price conscious to a fault are not necessarily your good customers. And you want to be careful about competing on price because you're bringing those people in. By increasing your prices, you're actually going to discourage those people. It could actually make your life easier overall. You also want to find ways to have customers buy more often, and there's a number of tactics to do that. There's bundling, there's adding product lines, there's separating products into different components, and so on. And you also want to become more cost efficient, profit margin. Now, if you look at those 4 items up above, if you have increased those 4 without drastically increasing your costs, your profit margin actually automatically increases as a result of those other things. So it's a self-feedback process. So improving each of your existing numbers by 10%, doing it 4 times, incremental improvements, you're improving your profitability one bite at a time. So this is the end of my series for today. Our series will continue. I've set up a new webinar to continue on every Tuesday for the next 3 Tuesdays as well that will look into the how of how we would go about doing each one of these 5 items. So I appreciate your attention. You can find me on the web at alchemistprofessorlarry.ca. My blog is larrythealchemistprofessor.blogspot.ca. And my email is larrythealchemistprofessor@gmail.com. And I do thank you. If I can find my... So are there any questions by any chance? So if there are no questions, then I'm going to stop